and welcome back to another video of jPlay. I'm Marcus and today I want to show you another prototype of a game that is currently on the German Spieleschmiede aka Gameforge. I already did a German preview of this one and luckily Mücke decided to also make an English version. So here I am again in English. I can't even show you a cover of this game, but here you see the German or Latin title of it. It's called Lignum, and I guess there's not really a good way to translate the subtitle. In Lignum, 2 to 4 players are trying to make a living of being a woodcutter and gaining the most amount of money by the end of the game. Lignum is the first crowdfunded game by Mücke or Mosquito Games and is already funded, but of course there is room for some stretch goals which would make this already cool game a little bit cooler. Of course you're looking at prototype components, but they're good enough to get a decent understanding about the game. Lignum is not just another worker placement title, as it offers different, let's say, dimensions. The first dimension is represented by those woodcutting areas where I can send my woodcutters to actually, do some lumbering. The next dimension is this so-called supply route that is surrounding the woodcutting area until it reaches the clearing here where the actual lumbering is taking place. And who knows, the neat little game Tokaido also loves the walking and collection mechanic there, which is pretty similar to the supply route in Lignum. This means I can move my forest worker any number of spaces ahead. I'm not allowed to stay, go backward or stop at an occupied space. Then I can take the goodie from the space I stop. So, in this example, I would be allowed to gain 1 thaler, which is no longer available for other players. In this example, Red could go to this space, which will give him a feud cube, and so on. On the supply route there are some spaces which can be occupied by more than 1 player. So here all players could hire some porters, or down there 2 players could buy some food for animals. On the bottom you can hire the actual woodcutters or the saw workers on the bottom right. I can hire all those workers for exactly 1 season, and usually I have to pay them, where one exception is the saw worker, which I get for free. At least the first one. When a player enters the clearing, the supply route phase is over for him. But all other players are still allowed to happily collect some of the nice goodies along the supply route. But everything comes with a price tag, because the player who enters the clearing first is allowed to lumber first in the next phase of the game. But this does only matter if 2 or more players are sharing the same woodcutting area on the board, which won't be the case in the very first of 8 rounds. Of course, resources are very limited in this game, so it's first come, first serve. So basically you can grab some of the woods before the others can. The selection of your woodcutting area is again an additional dimension of Lignum, where you secretly choose your area with those 2-sided player tokens which come with values from 1 to 6, so 1 for each area. So at the beginning of a new round, starting with round 2, each player secretly chooses one of his tokens. Then you reveal all those tokens to determine where each player wants to send his forest superintendent. But as mentioned, this mechanic won't start before the 2nd season of the game, which would be the summer of the 1st year. Of course, this shall make sure that all players have the same amount of wood for the very first season of the game. As of season 2, some areas can get pretty crowded, which is why it can be important to be the first at the clearing. Those woodcutting areas will be populated at the start of each new round, again starting as of round 2 with those marking cards. In a 3-player game, there will be 2 cards which will tell you how much wood is available in the areas. So you see how much and what kind of food will be there, and also how much food you will place in some of the areas. Food is important for the winter season of each of the 2 years, as you need to take care of your family. So you have to provide food and firewood. If you're thinking of Agricola now, you're not so far away. So the winter card for this year tells us that we need 5 food and 5 pieces of firewood in order to not suffer any penalties. After the supply path is done, the next dimension of Lignum takes place, which lets you perform certain actions in the given order. Here you see the actions for spring, summer and fall. Step 1 would be the lumbering phase. Step 2 is the rafting phase, where I can collect all the wood I have sent during the previous round by raft. A very cool mechanic, by the way. During step 3 I can transport the wood to my farmyard, either by porters, cart or by sending a raft. Then I can saw some wood which I transported to my farm, because processed wood usually provides more income. Step 5 is something from the advanced game, which I won't be showing today, but which is a cool addition to the base game. Then you can sell some wood from your farm. And money is always a very big issue in this game, as it is both a resource to buy stuff and each coin also represents an actual victory point. The last step is the drying phase, where I can dry some of my wood in order to refine it for a possible better price. So basically I move some of the wood to the right, and down there you can see the bonus for each piece of wood on this space, which I might sell in a future round. This mechanic is kinda nice for the base game, but is very important for the advanced game with the so-called order cards, which require certain kind of wood in a special refined stage. There is a special action track for the winter season as well, where I can also do some lumbering, but which works a little bit differently. I can also transport some wood, but only with a sled, if I got one during the previous rounds. But keep in mind that you cannot use any porters, rafts or carts during the winter season. I can also saw some of my wood and possibly work on orders. Then there is the food phase, where I have to have enough food on my farm. So in this example I have to give away 5 food cubes. And for each cube I don't have, I have to pay 3 thalers. And if I don't have enough money, I have to take a loan. For the loan, I immediately can take 4 thalers from the bank, but at the end of the game I pay back 7 thalers. If I take a second loan, I even have to pay back 16 thalers. After the food phase, we have to heat our farm with the appropriate amount of firewood. And here it's basically the same. For each firewood you cannot spend, you have to pay 3 thalers and possibly have to take an additional loan. Okay, let's do some actions here, and in this example blue would be the starting player. And because I know food is always an issue in Lignum, I think he will move to this space, takes the food tile present and replaces it with a food cube, which he will place on his farm. Then it's red, who desperately wants to have this very important card, which he also puts on his farm on the appropriate space for the equipment. I already mentioned that money is very vital in Lignum, so white will move here and will exchange the supply tile there with some actual money from the bank. Then it's blue again, and I think he will hire a porter. I guess 1 porter is enough, and therefore we have to pay 1 thaler. And I already mentioned it, all hired workers go to your farm, but will leave you at the end of each season. Red will basically do the same and will hire some workers. But he will pay 2 thalers and therefore he's allowed to hire 2 porters. White will also do the same, but I think he will only pay 1 coin because he thinks 1 porter should be enough. Blue wants to get this handcraft token. Unfortunately, this token cannot be used for actually building a cottage, because for a cottage I need those 3 tiles, but I can also use those tokens to sell them at the market quite at the end of the supply path. For an equal pair, I get 2 thalers for 3 of a kind, 4 and even 6 thalers if I sell 4 of a kind. So blue grabs the handcraft token and places it on his farm face down. So after time, the other players do not exactly know what sets I already have. This info can be quite important if I decide to grab a handcraft token, because I assume the other player could desperately need it. Red learned from this last game that it's vital to get a sled as quickly as possible, so he will immediately move down there in order to secure one. White has some extra cash, so he will move to the food space, he pays 1 thaler and grabs 1 food token, which we need later to feed the horse for the transport by cart. But I explain this later during the transport step. Blue cannot believe it, but he manages again to reach a space with a food tile. So he can exchange this with another food cube, and he nearly reached half of the demand for this year's winter. Red moves here in order to hire a woodcutter. So he pays 2 thalers and gets 1 back, of course, and so 1 woodcutter will be placed on his farm. White decides to do the same, and you notice that blue is no longer in the lead, but he also needs a woodcutter in order to get some more wood. So he also pays a thaler and will hire a woodcutter as well. And red happily spots a space with a saw, so without hesitation he moves there and gets the saw, which you actually need to saw, some wood. To saw wood you need at least 1 saw like this and at least 1 saw worker. But at least he already got a saw. White wants to prepare for the next season, so he decides to go for this raft. So let's grab the raft accordingly. And happily, blue spots his second brushwood handcraft tile, which he immediately grabs, of course. And now he has already a pair of 2 which he could sell at the market near to the end of the supply path. And so the players will continue to move along the supply path. Downtime is relatively low, but sometimes you really have to consider your strategy if a player grabs a tile you desperately needed, which happens a lot in this game of course, but I think this is a very cool and tense mechanic. So red might go for a saw worker, and the first one is always free and exclusively reserved for you, so each player can get at least one saw worker each season if he decides to stop here of course. If you want to hire a second saw worker, you have to get there before the other players or hope that no one hired the extra worker already. If that's the case, you pay 1 thaler and are allowed to hire him, but then he's no longer available for the other players. Then there is still the market step, and up there is still a card tile, but then at some point in time one player will reach the clearing. The player on space A will always start all the actions, but this is really only important for the lumbering step. All other steps can be done more or less simultaneously. The order at the clearing will also define the starting player order for the next turn, but this time starting from space D. So it's red, white and then blue for the next season. And then we start the first phase, in which is the lumbering. So I check where my forest superintendent is placed, because I'm only allowed to send my woodcutters to this area. There I can place the woodcutters I hired this season. Alternatively, I can send my own worker there, who is some kind of jack of all trades who I can use to lumber, saw or carry wood. And for each woodcutter I send there, I'm allowed to get 1 wood of my choice from that area. So 2 in this example. Unfortunately, I cannot directly put this wood to my farm, so I have to place it on my camp first before I'm allowed to transport it to my farm during the transport step. In the very first season there will be no step 2, as we haven't sent any wood by raft before. So spring or summer would be ideal to gather some rafts, which I could use for step 3 to assign exactly 1 porter and to spend any number of rafts, so 2 in this example, to send some wood by raft. And for each raft I spend, I'm allowed to put 1 wood from my camp onto the river space on my farmyard player board. This also means that I cannot use those 2 wooden discs during this turn, though those are basically blocked for a whole season. Still, it's a great way to transport a high amount of wood if I have managed to collect enough rafts, of course. And it really only makes sense with at least 2 or 3 rafts. So this space shows me that I can collect 2 pieces of firewood during step 2 of the next season, if it's not winter. I can also use my porters to transport 1 piece of wood per porter I spent. So if I place 1 porter at my camp, I can transport 1 piece of wood to my farm. But then I have to decide if I want to sell it or saw it first. Sawing wood is required in order to get firewood for the winter. And this table down there shows me how much processed wood I get for each type of wood. And I already explained to you that you also get some more money for processed wood than you would get for the raw material. In the very first season, it's really vital to sell some wood in order to collect enough coin for the next season. But you should also process 1 piece of wood in this round to prepare for winter. So in this example, I will sell 1 piece of wood later and saw 1 piece of wood during step 4, I believe. And last but not least, I can transport some wood with a cart, which is pretty efficient. Therefore, I need 1 cart, which I had to grab on the supply path. I need exactly 1 porter, who will be the coachman basically. And then I need some food for the animal. And as long as it's fresh, I can transport 3 pieces of wood, as long as the food is on the rightmost space. Once used, I will move the food token to the left, so it's getting less effective for the next usage. And after the second usage, I will remove it and put it back to the common reserve. After transporting the wood, I can finally process it. And to process the wood, I need some wood on the saw space of my player board, of course. Then I need at least 1 saw worker and at least 1 saw. And for each combo of saw worker and saw, I'm allowed to process 1 piece of wood. And according to the table, I see how much processed wood I get for each type of raw material. Firewood is the most efficient kind of wood, so I get 4 pieces of processed material. And now I have to take a decision again, if I want to store the processed wood for the winter in order to heat, or if I want to sell it. Of course, I can split these pieces in any combination I want. So I can put 2 pieces of wood to my firewood supply, or I can decide to sell some pieces of wood, and I think this is what I will do now. And I guess I will put 2 pieces of firewood onto the appropriate supply space, because winter is coming. Not sure if I mentioned it already, but all tiles I use will be discarded afterwards. So I have to collect another saw when I used it to process some wood. In the base game I skip the order step and go directly to the sell action. And here I can sell everything what I have stored down there. Each player board shows a price list for each piece of wood, and I can also see that I can sell timber only when I processed it first. For a raw piece of firewood I would gain 3 thalers, and for each piece of processed firewood I gain 1 thaler. And because I get 4 pieces when I saw the firewood, I can also gain 1 additional coin. But I mainly use firewood for the winter because it's very efficient that way. Still, in the first round I should also sell some pieces for its actual value. So here I could sell those pieces of wood for 5 thalers, which is definitely not a bad start for the upcoming season. If I would have enough cash already, I could also decide to dry some of those pieces, which I would officially do during the next step, of course. I guess I already explained how you could refine your wood by drying it, so I think I can skip this step for now. Then we would start a new round by replenishing the supply path with a random order of tiles. We also replenish the worker spaces, and then we replenish the cutting areas by drawing 2 marking cards in a 3-player game. So we have to place 1 medium brown piece in area 2, 1 timber in 3, and 2 pieces of firewood at area 4. So here we place the medium brown piece, the dark timber goes there, and 2 pieces of firewood will go to area 4. And we are also allowed to place 1 food to area 5 and 6. The second marking card tells us to place 2 pieces of firewood to area 1. 1 dark timber goes to area 6, and 1 of this will be placed in area 4. Area 2 and 3 get 1 food cube each. And now we start to play some poker, as I have to decide where I will place my forest tile to make sure I can get those valuable food cubes. Of course, I also want to choose an area where there is enough wood available. I also have to guess what area the other players might choose, so I would voluntarily select an area which is not the best, to be at least alone there. So this area with 2 pieces of firewood, 1 timber and also 1 food cube could be quite interesting. So I could be modest and go for area 5, where there is less wood, and hope that no other player will go there as well. But that's basically the same with area 2 or area 3 up there, and the other players could think exactly the same, so we might still all choose the same area. So all players will choose a numbered tile, and of course each player has 1 tile for each area. So let's reveal all the tiles, and here white would choose area 3, red chose area 3 as well, which is very unfortunate for both, and blue is the lucky winner as he will be all alone in area 2. Lucky him. So blue goes here, and white and red meet in woodcutting area 3. And now it does matter who will reach the clearing first, because he will be allowed to lumber first and grab all the wood there before any other player can do some lumbering. But there is a way around this, because you can pay 1 thaler to move your superintendent to another free area, so where no other player is present. It's good to be alone, because if I'm the only player present in an area, I can grab all food cubes there. If I share an area with another player, I have to divide up the food equally. As I cannot divide a single cube, no player gets this cube, which is definitely a pity for both. In a later round there might be 2 cubes in this area, so both players would get 1 cube each. If there would be 3 cubes, the third one would also have to stay. And after assigning the areas, we would start again with a supply path. So red would start, and he wants to secure a saw for this round, and so on. And finally we will reach the clearing, we will do them lumbering, and some rounds later, winter is coming. The winter season is much quicker as there is no supply path, so everything you needed has to be present on your farm. So you have better taken care of getting a sled, enough food and firewood. But I still have the possibility to get some wood to transport by sled or to saw. In phase 5 or 6 of each winter I have to pay food and firewood. After winter it's again spring, then summer, fall and again a winter season. At the end we perform a final selling phase where we can sell all the wood in our storage to gain some additional victory points. I believe I showed you everything from the base game. Everything but how to get those awesome cottage tiles. I can build those cottage tiles at all times during my turn. And when I manage to get the 3 different handcraft tokens, I would be allowed to build 3 cottages by turning those face down, and you can use these as very cool and helpful bonus actions. First, I would place those cottage tiles on my player board to note down those bonus actions accordingly. So I could use 1 tile to get in 1 time, use extra jack of all trades, who can be very helpful especially during the winter season. A cottage tile can also be used to get the whole food from an unoccupied wood cutting area for free. Last but not least, I can use it to try 1 piece of wood for free, mainly important for the advanced game with the order cards. I can place those tokens wherever I like. So I could use them all to get additional workers, or 2 tokens for extra workers and 1 for the food actions, and so on. But once assigned, they have to stay there until I use them, and then they will be discarded. And that was basically Lignum, quick and dirty. But I really have to admit that I enjoyed it a big deal. And for a prototype, the rules and all are pretty slick and balanced already. It's definitely not a light game, but the downtime is surprisingly low in this one. But I guess that's because of the different, I still like to call them, dimensions. The rules are pretty straightforward, and the first time you went through the supply path, have done some lumbering, transporting and soaring, everything gets crystal clear pretty soon. As mentioned, this was only the base game, which is already relatively heavy. But there is still more, as there is the advanced game with the order cards here, which can grant you additional victory points by the end of the game, and not too few of those. And if you want even more, there's the expert version with those scheduled tasks, which I have to plan for future seasons in order to gain additional goodies. But be warned, with this variant the game gets really heavy. I hope you enjoyed my little preview of Lignum, and as mentioned, you can get a version with the English rules at the German Spieleschmiede, and of course you find a link to the campaign in the description of this video. Check it out and go for it, it's definitely worth it. Hope to see you soon in one of my next videos, and until then, bye bye.